this is a demo class for live classes GATE 2022 which are starting from February 10th, right? You can interrupt me if you have any doubts. You can just pop in the chat and I can repeat. Or so yesterday 3 topics came into this discussion. So today in this live demo I'll be covering 3 topics. Number 1, it is material balance. I think you all know what is material balance. It is from an extractive metallurgy point of view, or rather blast furnace. Okay, so today we'll see blast furnace material balance. The second topic which people have requested is Morse circle. Okay, the concept of Morse circle, and also finally the third topic is phase diagrams. Correct? These are the 3 topics which you guys have suggested me, right? So we'll continue by starting with phase diagram. Okay, we'll go in a reverse order, right? Because phase diagram is one of the important topic. So let's start. So the first topic which I want to start again, this is a demo class, so I'll be covering a brief overview of all these topics. Of course, to go about in detail, we can't do that in this 1 hour session. So I hope you can understand that. But again, yes, if you have any doubts regarding something, you can pop into the chat and talk. Right. So what is a phase diagram? So phase diagrams are one of the pillar of physical metallurgy. Right. So it explains the equilibrium relationships between the phases. Okay, so let's say we have an alloy system AB. Okay, depending on the composition of B, we can form n number of alloys, correct? But at what temperature, which alloy is stable, which phase is stable, is actually explained by my phase diagrams. Okay, so the equilibrium relationships can be studied from these phase diagrams. That's the reason why these are also called as equilibrium diagrams. Phase diagrams are also called what? Equilibrium diagrams. Okay, so first of all, what is this phase? Okay, so I just directly jumped in and telling about the phase diagrams, but what is a phase? I think you all know, you all have studied in your 12th or 11th, right? Phase, okay, which we usually denote by P here. Okay. The well-known definition of phase is chemically homogeneous, physically distinct, and mechanically separable part of any particular system. Okay, so what are those? What are the characteristics that you need to define a phase? Chemically homogeneous. Just give me 1 minute. I think someone unmuted. Let me mute them. Yeah, so whoever is joining, please try to mute themselves, okay, so that there is no disturbance in the audio. Cool, thanks. Yeah, so phase. So phase is a chemically homogeneous, physically distinct, and what is the other thing that I said? Mechanically separable. Okay, so this is a well-known definition of a phase. Okay, chemically homogeneous, that means uniform composition. Physically distinct, that means it you should be able to differentiate it. అంటే ఒక సిస్టంలో మోర్ దాన్ 1 ఫేసెస్ ఉంటే యూ షుడ్ బి ఏబుల్ టు టెల్, అంటే ఇది ఒక సపరేట్ ఎంటిటీ అని చెప్పగలగాలి. అండ్ ఆఫ్ కోర్స్ mechanically separable in the sense by doing some mechanical operations you should be able to separate it. Okay, so if all these 3 are satisfied, we call it a phase. What are the examples? Best examples that you have is a solid. Solid is a phase. Liquid, gases. If you are talking about any systems, we have alpha iron, gamma iron. Okay, this is ferrite, this is austenite, which we call. Okay, if you remember the iron carbon phase diagram, right? So all these are an example of phases. So what is phase diagram now? Phase diagram is actually explaining equilibrium relationship between the phases. That is why we call it an equilibrium diagram. And what is a phase? Phase is something which is chemically homogeneous, physically distinct, and mechanically separable part of any system. And we saw these are my examples, which are solid, liquid, gas, ferrite, austenite. All these are the examples of my phases, right? Now, why we are actually interested to study about phases is because phase diagrams will give me relationships between the phases. Okay, at what temperature, what phase is stable, which phases are in equilibrium, everything can be studied from a phase diagram. Of course, I'll explain how to do that, right? But before going there, you have to know about one important rule in order to study my phase diagrams, which is called as Gibbs phase rule. Okay, so Gibbs phase rule actually gives you an idea about the degrees of freedom, the number of components, and the number of phases. Okay, so what did I say? So actually, first let me say the rule. It is F equal to C minus P plus 2. Right. So what is F here? F is the degree of freedom. Okay, and C is nothing but the number of components. Okay. So what are these? What is a degree of freedom and what is a component? So as I just gave this example of an AB alloy. So AB is actually mixed in a particular ratio to form some alpha phase, right? Then in alpha phase we have how many components? 2 components. So the number of components, or this C, is actually written as the independent chemical species that are required to explain my system. Okay, so independent chemical species. How many independent chemical species you have? In an AB alloy you have 2, correct? That is about the number of components. What is degree of freedom? Degree of freedom is basically variables, again independent variables that are associated with the system. Okay, what is a variable? Basically degrees of freedom, as I said, is a number of independent variables. It explains that how many variables a system has. That means a system can be modified. Let's say a phase can be formed, or a phase can be transformed into some other phase by changing what variables, by changing how many variables. That is called as my degrees of freedom. Okay, so based on these two, you have this relation, which is my Gibbs phase rule. Okay, so the degrees of freedom is equal to number of components minus the number of phases plus 2, right? Now, based on the number of components, we have different systems. Okay, so here if you see, I said the number of independent species, chemical species, can be anything, right? So if C equal to 1, we call it a unary system. Okay, the whole system contains of only one component. If there are 2 components, which is in this case AB, we call it a binary system. Okay, this best example is what? Steel. What is a steel? Steel is an interstitial solid solution of carbon in iron. Okay, so steel is one of the best binary solid solution by again steel if you are taking plain carbon steel. Okay, and similarly if C is equal to 3, we call this a ternary system, and if C equal to 4, we call it a quaternary system. Okay, so now today in this next 20 minutes or so, what I wanted to explain is about how these unary phase diagram, binary phase diagram and ternary phase diagram will look like, right? So before going there, also I want to explain about these degrees of freedom. So I said degrees of freedom are what? Independent variables, the number of independent variables that are associated with the system. So what comes to your mind? Basically, we have temperature, we have composition, correct? If the composition is changing, the system also changes. And what is the third one? We have pressure. Okay, these are the three important degrees of freedom that are associated with any of the system. But usually what we do is, we will not consider this guy. Pressure is actually omitted. Why? Because all the experiments which we do in lab, at least in lab, what we do is, we are doing it in a room pressure, room temperature and pressure. Okay, of course temperature may be increased by using some furnaces, but we are in the pressure of room conditions, correct? What is the pressure? It is 1 atmosphere. So we are not changing this guy. So at least for all the metallurgical aspects, all the metallurgical processes that we deal with, most of them, the pressure is taken to be a constant value. So here if you see, now we are only left with these two, temperature and composition, right? That is why we have a modified phase rule explaining about this condition. Modified phase rule where F is equal to what? Whatever we have, C minus P plus 2, correct? C minus 2 plus 2 is what we have. But here one of them is taken out. Pressure is no more degrees of freedom. So minus 1, right? I'm just removing out the pressure term. So this will give me F is equal to C minus P plus 1. This is one thing which we'll use for all the phase diagrams, because all these are actually in equilibrium at what? The pressure of 1 atmosphere. So these we call it as condensed phase diagrams. Okay, condensed phase diagrams, correct? And this is why you see temperature versus composition diagrams for binary systems, right? If you remember any iron carbon diagram or copper nickel diagram, what you have? You have temperature on y-axis and composition on x-axis, correct? Where is pressure? You don't have it. Why? Because we already removed the effect of pressure. We made it a constant. This is at a 1 atmosphere pressure. And because the pressure is fixed, we are calling it a condensed phase diagram. Why? Because the phases that you have are only solid and liquid. There won't be any gaseous phase coming in. For what? For these constant pressure diagrams or condensed phase diagrams. Okay, so this is an important thing you have to remember. Also, what is the range? So basically, the minimum degrees of freedom a system can have is 0. That means at a particular point, at a particular given conditions, if F is equal to 0, that means if you change any of the variable that you have, let's say temperature or composition, you will not land up in the same point, in the same condition. Okay, I'll just explain about an example also. And F max will actually depend on what? Your number of components you have in a system and number of phases you have in a system. This is about modified phase rule, right? Now what we'll do is, we'll discuss about one of the versatile diagram. Okay, so as I said, we'll start with unary phase diagrams. Okay, what is unary? I just explained, correct? Unary, your number of components will be 1. That means it is 100% A or 100% B present in your system. Best example, okay, to study this, because here if you see, what is constant? The composition is constant, right? Because 100% we have A only. There is no point of some 10% B or 20% B and remaining A. No. Because there is only one component made in the system, or the system is made of only one component, you have a pressure temperature diagrams. Okay, pressure temperature diagram is used here for a unary system. Best example for unary phase diagram is what? Water system. I think every one of you know this water phase diagram. So usually we call it PT diagram, because in our school level we don't know what are phase diagrams and all. Correct? So how it will look like? So basically you have pressure on y-axis and temperature on x-axis, right? And you have something like this. Okay, something like this. The slopes should be different. And this point over here, what is it called? So basically, what are these regions which I have separated out? So this is solid phase, which is ice. This is liquid, which is my water. And here we have water vapor. So if you see, everything consists of what? H2O. Right? The composition of water will not change. It has 2 atoms of iron and 1 atom of oxygen. It is not changing for us. Correct? That is why we are actually omitting the composition term and taking PT diagrams. Okay? And this point which I have mentioned here, this is called my triple point. Why? Because at that particular point, this point, if you see, all the three phases are in equilibrium with each other. Okay? So what are these lines telling you? So let's say this boundary is explaining equilibrium between these two phases. That means ice and water, which is a solid and liquid phase. Similarly, this thing between ice and vapor. Similarly, this thing between vapor and water. So if you see, all these are different processes. So ice to water is a melting. Correct? Ice to vapor is what? Solid to gas, sublimation. Liquid to vapor, water to water vapor is what? Boiling. Okay, so these lines will explain me the effect of pressure on the boiling points or the melting points. So what we know, basically what we studied till now, okay, let me just remove this. Okay, yeah, so what we studied till now is basically when pressure is equal to 1 atmosphere, okay, just draw this line because pressure is constant. So just take this. What is this? This will be my 0 degrees Celsius and this will be my 100 degrees Celsius. That is what we studied as freezing point of water and boiling point of water. Correct? This is how we assumed, this is how we arrived at these guys. Okay, from the phases, from the phase diagrams. Okay, and triple point. So triple point also has some coordinates here, right? So triple point, usually it has 0.006 atmosphere pressure and 0.01 degrees Celsius. If you are able to maintain these conditions of 0.006 atmosphere pressure and 0.01 degrees Celsius temperature, then you can see all the three, what are these? Phases of water. I don't know why I'm telling iron. Yeah, but yes, one task which I want to give you guys is try to send me the PT diagram of iron system. Okay, because in iron also we have different forms, right? We have alpha, gamma, delta. Correct? So just try to draw a PT diagram of an iron system and try to send me. Okay, so that we can discuss it. Right? So this is about a unary phase diagram. I hope you all understood this. Now moving on to the next important diagram, which is one of the versatile phase diagram that we have, is a binary phase diagram. Why I said it is a versatile thing? Because most of the alloy systems that we deal with is actually a binary alloy. That means C is how much? 2. Okay. So one more, there is one more reason why we actually omitted pressure I just explained, right? For binary, we took temperature versus pressure. Okay, why we are ignoring the pressure term here? Why? Because usually what are the 3 degrees of freedom that we deal with? Temperature, pressure and composition, correct? Therefore, here if you actually see, you need 3 axes, or you can say you need a 3D plot generated, which is very much complicated. You cannot draw it on a plane of paper, correct? So what people have thought is just ignore this guy, because anyway in the physical state we are performing most of them at room temperature only. So the pressure is 1 atmosphere. So this has been converted to this temperature composition plots. Okay, so here we are ignoring pressure and also we are ignoring what? Vapor phases. So that's what we discussed till now. So here we use what? Modified Gibbs phase rule. Okay, which we have already discussed. F is equal to C minus P plus 1. So one more thing, you can also go back to the unary diagram and try to study the degrees of freedom at different lines or different points. Okay, so best example here is, as I already said, iron carbon or iron carbide, which we take. Okay, so we have copper nickel, we have lead tin. Okay, more binary phase diagrams have subcategories also. Okay, so basically what we have temperature composition plots, T percentage B. Okay, so that means this is 100% A, and somewhere here we have 100% B. Yeah, and you are plotting it. Okay, so remember temperature should always be in Kelvin. Okay, so whatever calculations you are doing, you should be able to do this, right? So now, because now there is a competition, we have 2 terms, A and B. So usually what we do is, as you can see, I mentioned the composition in terms of percentage B, correct? So the compositions are usually denoted in terms of weight percentages, or you can also represent them in atom percentages. So what is the relation between these two? I think you should be able to know that by now. So let's say we have AB. So atomic percentage of A is equal to weight percentage of A divided by atomic weight of A by total. So what is the total? That is weight percentage A by atomic weight of A plus weight percentage of B divided by atomic weight of B, okay, into 100, because we are dealing in percentages. So this is the relation between weight percentages and atomic percentages. Okay, this is about binary phase diagram. Okay, now how about ternary? So ternary is interesting. So ternary phase diagram is a third type. Of course, in binary we have many kinds of reactions. Okay, if you remember some of them, we have eutectic, eutectoid, peritectic, peritectoid. So all these are some kinds of important binary reactions. Okay, reactions that you find in binary phase diagrams. Okay, now let's come to this ternary. So this is again interesting, how you can actually relate 3 components. Of course, ternary means what? As I said, C must be equal to 3, correct? So what we do here is, we use something like this. Okay, we have a triangle and we take, okay, let's take the 3 components to be some A, B and C. Okay, so we have A over here, B over here and C over here. So what we did, we assigned pure materials to the vertices. Okay, that means if is 100% A, this vertex or this point denotes 100% B and this is 100% C. So the first assumption that you need to see here is the vertices. You are actually giving to what? Pure components. Now what about the sides, sir? So if you carefully see, what is this? Only this line, if you carefully see, AB, it is a side of it, this triangle. But if you carefully also see, we are relating 100% A and 100% B along this line. That is what we saw in a binary thing. If you carefully see here, there is a line here, correct? And we are actually relating between the extreme ends are 100% A and 100% B. So interestingly, this side over here is explaining me information about these two components A, B. Similarly, this line will give me information about B, C. Similarly, this line will give me information about A and C. Okay, so what is the next interesting thing that you saw? So the sides of this triangle are actually explaining about equilibrium of two components. Similarly, if there is some point inside the triangle, okay, somewhere inside the triangle, then you should obviously able to tell that all the three components will be present, correct? If you have some point over here, then you can say that I have 100% A. If you have some point over here, you can say, okay, fine, it is looking like 50% A and 50% B. But if there is something in between this triangle, then obviously you must be able to say that my alloy, my ternary system actually has all the three phases, three components. So how to study that? So let's see how to study that. So it's easy, it's very easy. First of all, what you do, I'll just move this over here. Yeah, so what you can do here is, you must first fix the direction. So what I'll do is, I'll just take an anti-clockwise direction. So I have this, and I have this. And what you need to do is, just take your direction, okay, whatever is it pointing towards. Okay, so what I was telling is, just take the arrow, the direction which is pointing towards your vertex, just take that percentage on this line. If you see the next one, this arrow, it is pointing towards B, therefore this is percentage B, and this will be percentage C. Okay, so what I am doing is, it's simple. So basically, if here you have 100% A, on the other end you have how much? 0% A. So along 0 to 100, you need to take down your projection and explain that that is your percentage A. So how to take that projection? It's again easy. So let me take some point over here. So what you will do is, just draw lines parallel to all my three sides passing through this point. Okay, now always remember, we assumed a direction already. Okay, from 0% A, go to the first point. So let's say this is my first point, X. So this guy over here is how much? This is 0% A. So Cx will be my percentage A. Okay, similarly, what is the next arrow that you have here on the B side? So what is my AY? This length will actually give me percentage B. Similarly, on C side, let's say this is Z, BZ will give me percentage C. So just by taking these lines, drawing these lines, you can say that you can get the percentages of A, B and C. And always remember, A plus B plus C should be equal to 100%. Obviously, correct? Because you have three components. On summation, you should be able to go to your total components of the system. That is what this is. So this is how you can easily study ternary phase diagram. Okay, so before ending the phase diagram topic, I just want to go back to this unary phase diagram and explain how you can use the Gibbs phase rule. So what is the Gibbs phase rule here? This will be F equal to C minus P plus 2. Okay, because here pressure is not constant, right? Now, how many components that we have? Obviously, we are in a unary system, so C equal to 1. Number of phases, let's keep it, because at different positions in the graph, you can see different number of phases, plus 2. Therefore, here you can see F is what? 3 minus P. So, for this water unary diagram system or any of the unary diagram, I got this relation F equal to 3 minus P. Now, interestingly, at this point, triple point, how many phases are in equilibrium? In the name itself, we have triple point. That means you have all the 3 phases to be in equilibrium. That means at my triple point, F equal to 3 minus 3. So, F equal to 0. That is what I was telling. If F is equal to 0, even if you change pressure or temperature by a little bit, you don't get the triple point anymore. The triple point is not there. If you are actually shifting, the triple point is now converted completely into liquid, right? That is what is F is equal to 0 meaning. Now also take this line over here. So here, how many phases are in equilibrium? You have 2 phases in equilibrium, right? Ice and water, correct? So if you just put it here, 3 minus 2. Therefore, on these lines, F is equal to 1. Okay. So here you can say, okay, fine, I can just shift some of my temperature or pressure, and I can still go back to that. That means, let's say I am here. Now I am shifting my pressure to this thing. So there exists some other temperature where you can find the same equilibrium. That is what is meaning that is equal to 1. Similarly, if you are somewhere here, what happens? Now the phase is equal to 1, completely ice. So the degrees of freedom is how much? 3 minus 1 is equal to 2 now. So now you can have this much of area in which you can change anything. Pressure or temperature, you can play with both of them and you can still get ice. But here it is not the case. If you are changing one guy, automatically the other guy is changing to give you the equilibrium. But here you have the scope of changing pressure and temperature to whatever range within this single phase region, and still you can attain ice. This is about how you can use Gibbs phase rule into phase diagrams, and yes, you can use this to whatever extent you want in when you are doing and dealing with the higher important systems like iron carbon system. Okay, we call these points of F equal to 0 as invariant points. What is invariant? Invariant means you don't have any independent variables there. If you change at least one variable, the system does not want to stay at that triple point, right? This is about phase diagrams. So yeah, maybe in half an hour I just gave an overview about what is a phase diagram. It is a graphical representation explaining equilibrium relationships between phases, right? And we saw what are the 3 different important phase diagrams or systems that we have. Okay, now moving on to the second important topic which you guys have suggested me, which is again one more graphical representation only, which is my Morse circle. Okay, so Morse circle is also a useful graphical representation only, but here this is under my mechanical metallurgy part. So you have to now shift all your phases and components and go and talk about stresses, normal stresses, shear stresses, etc. So basically, what is a Mohr circle? As I said, it is a graphical representation of a state of stress. Okay, state of stress on any point of any oblique plane. What is an oblique plane? Oblique plane is some plane within your body inclined to the horizontal. Okay, so usually again before discussing this, we have got much of derivations to be discussed about, but I'm not going to all those things. I'm directly giving you the formula to explain Mohr circle. So basically we have two important types of stresses you need to study. Number one is the normal stresses and number two is the shear stresses. Okay, shear. I think you all know what is a shear stress, right? Okay, shear stress is something which is actually acting along a plane. Okay, it's actually not normal. What is normal? Normal stress is nothing but perpendicular to my plane. Okay, so this is basically denoted by sigma and this is denoted by tau or tau ij. Okay, so we'll discuss all this tau ij and all, right? Otherwise, yeah, let me just give you the relations now. So sigma n will be equal to, I think I got some message, screenshot. Yeah, no problem. I'll upload this demo on YouTube itself. So cool. Yeah, sigma n equal to sigma x plus sigma y by 2 plus sigma x minus sigma y by 2 into cos 2 theta. Let me shift this down. Yeah, cos 2 theta plus tau xy into sin 2 theta. Okay, so I'll explain what is this theta and all. Okay, as I said, right, it is an inclined plane. An oblique plane has an inclination, correct? That is what we are talking about. Okay, so it's simple. So let's say I have a plane stress condition. What is a plane stress condition? Plane stress is just a 2D case. You don't have sigma z. Okay, so let me say I am applying sigma x and this is sigma y. Correct? I hope you are able to understand this thing. Even if you are not understanding, no worries. We'll discuss all this in the full course even before coming to Mohr circle. But yeah, as some of our friends asked, I had to bring it back now. Okay, so now what you are doing is you are taking some plane. Okay, this plane over here, if you see and you want what is the normal stress and the shear stress acting on that particular plane. Okay, that is nothing but the inclination. Okay, theta. Okay, remember one more important thing is in Mohr circle concept, 2 theta in Mohr circle is equivalent to theta in a physical state. Okay, you can easily think of it. Okay, so I'm leaving it as a task for you why we are actually making 2 theta. Okay, so that's one thing you need to think about. So this is what we are doing actually. So this plane is what you are studying now. So this is your sigma n, that is this formula, and what is this? This is my tau, that is the shear stress, which we will see now. Tau will be equal to sigma y minus sigma x by 2 into sin 2 theta plus tau xy into cos 2 theta. Okay, now of course I think I forgot to explain about this tau xy. What is this tau xy now? If you carefully see, I said that you have some shear stress also. So let me just put it over here. This is the shear stress for me. Okay, and that thing is nothing but tau xy. Okay, and this can be written as tau yx. So what is this xy over there? What is that representation? So now let's come back and study this thing. So we have something called as stress tensor and all, but don't go there. In order to explain this, tau ij is sufficient. So tau ij is a shear stress which is acting on a plane perpendicular to I axis. Okay, I is a direction, of course, and in the direction of what? J axis. So that is why if you carefully see what I wrote here, tau xy. So we know, right, this is x and this is y directions. Of course, that is how I already mentioned previously. So if you carefully see this guy over here, this is the shear stress, tau xy, shear component, right? So what you can do here is, basically I'm telling that it is acting on a plane perpendicular to y axis. So this is my y axis and this plane is perpendicular to x axis. Sorry, it is x axis. This is x axis and this plane is a plane which is perpendicular to x axis. So that is why I took I to be what? X. Clear? You are understanding what I am telling? The plane perpendicular to x axis. So I is equal to x. Now in what direction? So of course this is my direction. I can zoom you if you are not able to see. Okay. So now it's okay. So this plane is actually perpendicular to my x axis. So I is equal to x. Now it is in the direction of y axis, correct? It is obviously pointing towards the positive y. So j is what? Y. So tau I j here in my case is tau xy. So that is why you can understand now how I got tau yx. Okay. So this is how you represent the shear stress, right? So now that we know the components normal stress and shear stress, if you carefully see, so let me number this as 1 and this as 2. So what I want you to do is just take, otherwise you can just bring this outside. If you just do 1 square plus 2 square, okay, after bringing this on the other side. So what I'll do is I'll just write this like this. What will this be now? This will be my equal to, correct? I just took my one of my term to the LHS, right? So now 1 square plus 2 square, if you carefully do, you get a circle equation. That guy is called my Morse circle. And what is the equation that you get? Again, I'm not dwelling into the derivations, but yeah, let me explain this. So sigma n minus sigma x plus sigma y by 2 whole square plus tau square is equal to sigma x minus sigma y by 2 whole square plus tau xy whole square. This is what you will be getting, because if you carefully see, cos square theta plus sin square theta is equal to 1, right? So using those trigonometric operations, you will get that, and some terms will get cancelled also. This is what the final equation that you will be left with. Now if you carefully observe this, what is this? So this is looking something like x minus x1 whole square plus y square equal to, this is to be r square. So we know, right, this is an equation of a circle. So basically x minus x1 square plus y minus y1 square is equal to r square is a circle with a radius r and the center is x1 comma y1. So here what is x1? X1 is what? Sigma x plus sigma y by 2 comma, what is y1? Y1 is 0 in this case. 0. So this will be my center of the Morse circle. Okay. So I can write this as what? Sigma average comma 0. Right. So Mohr circle is a circle with sigma average comma 0 as a center. Clear till now? Now let's see how you can actually generate this Mohr circle, okay, without even solving all this. So this I have explained so that this is a circle in order to tell that this is a circle. But if you carefully see, what are my x and y? X and y are nothing but my coordinates, correct? Coordinate axis. So here my x and y are what? Sigma n and tau. Therefore, this circle, this Mohr circle is in a sigma n comma tau space. So this is my x-axis and this is my y-axis. Correct? This is what you need to know. So what is my Mohr circle if you are defining again? Mohr circle is a graphical representation of state of stress of any point on oblique plane in a sigma tau space. Right? Sigma tau space is an important thing. Now let's quickly see how to construct this. Okay, how you can construct the Mohr circle. Okay. So now let me bring this same condition over there. Let me just copy paste this guy if I can. Yeah, cool. So this is what we got. This is the given condition, right? Now what should be the center now? So before that, let me take 2 points on these two normal planes, right? So let me take this to be some A and some point here to be some B. And because these are in sigma tau space, usually you need to actually give them some coordinates. So A is basically sigma x comma, because you can see, right, this plane, what is the normal plane, normal stress? Sigma x itself, comma minus tau xy. Similarly, I'll tell you how that negative came in. And B will be sigma y, because sigma y is the normal stress now, comma tau xy. So here one question is, why this negative over here? So here shear stress is expressed a bit differently. Okay, so tau, let me explain this. Someone, oh guys, you are muting me instead of muting someone. Cool, yeah. So tau, it is nothing but the shear stress. So tau, which is causing a clockwise rotation, a clockwise movement, is positive. So what did I say? Shear stress which is causing a clockwise rotation is positive. So now what is clockwise and what is anti-clockwise? If you carefully see, I have tau xy in this direction. Therefore this moment will be in like this. But here if you see, tau yx is something like this. So tau yx or tau yx is also equal to tau xy. Okay, so we have a theorem where we can prove that tau ij equal to tau ji. Okay, so that is the reason why I wrote tau xy here. So here this is providing a clockwise rotation, right? Correct? The direction actually. You can easily say from the direction. So tau xy is negative at A because it is in the anti-clockwise movement, anti-clockwise rotation. Clear? So first step for construction of Mohr circle is done. What is the first step? To take these coordinates A, B. Now, okay, let's plot it and also plot them in which space? Sigma tau space, obviously. So let me draw that for you. So tau is a y, sigma n is on x. So now let's say A is sigma x is positive somewhere here, let's take, and it is negative, so somewhere something like this here. This is my point A. Similarly, point B will be somewhere here. Okay. Now the next step, so this is step 1. Okay, plotting AB in the sigma tau space and also join them, plot them and join them. Okay, so what you need to do, of course this is B. To join them, just join these two. Okay, I'll just make it a straight line. Yeah, perfect. Now, after joining, take a midpoint. So what is midpoint of AB line? Midpoint will be what? A plus B by 2. If you carefully see, this is what? Sigma x plus sigma y by 2 comma 0. Interestingly, this point over here on my x-axis is the center of the Mohr circle. Take it as a center. And now taking this AB as a diameter, draw a circle. Simple. Done. This is the Mohr circle. So again, this will be how much? This angle here is 2 theta. Right. So what we did? We took 2 points AB. We plotted on these sigma tau space, joined them, took the midpoint, and interestingly the midpoint is what we got from the equation which we derived, correct? So if you see, this is what we got, right? Here also sigma x plus sigma y by 2 plus 0, because these two will get cancelled, right? Now take this AB as diameter. That means let's say CB as a radius or CA as a radius. Join the circle. Make a circle, and this will explain you any of your stresses at any of the angle. Okay, so let's say this is A, correct? If you are changing theta from x-axis, obviously, if you are changing your theta something like this, then you get this to be your values. Okay, so what is this? Now this will be your shear stress. Okay, if this is the theta. Therefore, you can also study something else from here. Here you got 2 important points on x-axis, 2 extreme points, which we call sigma 1 and sigma 2, which is my principal stresses. Okay, again, principal stresses is a separate topic, so don't worry about it. But remember, principal stresses are nothing but the maximum and the minimum normal stresses. Okay, so let's say this is origin. So sigma 1 or sigma 2 can be equal to what? OC plus R, plus or minus R. Okay, so this is an easy way. Okay, we have a big formula to actually calculate the principal stresses. From Mohr circle, simply by taking the lengths you can get it. Okay, what is OC again? OC is sigma average. Correct? OC is nothing but this length. What is C? Sigma x plus sigma y by 2. Right? So OC plus R, or sigma average plus or minus R. Interestingly, you can also have one more thing here. What is R here? Okay. So basically, if you carefully observe the maximum shear stress, that is this point, correct? This guy will be my maximum shear stress that I have. And if you just join this, what is this thing? This thing is again nothing but my radius. So you can take the radius of the Mohr circle to be tau max. So what I can further write this I can write this to be sigma average plus or minus tau max. This is very good. So from here you got the maximum shear stress and also you got the principal stresses. Okay, you can get much more information. Okay, you can get many other informations too, but as of now I hope this should be enough for you guys for knowing how to construct Mohr circle and how to calculate the principal stresses and the maximum shear stress, right? So this is about Mohr circle concept, right? How to draw it and what is the need. Okay, so it's pretty much simple. So only thing you are doing here is you are saving time by just drawing a circle and avoiding all the hefty calculations. That's it, right? I hope You are all following this? Now, let's move on to the next important topic that one of your friends have asked me, which is material balance. Okay, material balance is one more important topic in extractive metallurgy. So here we are taking about blast furnace, right? So blast furnace material balance is what I will be covering in the next 10 to 15 minutes, right? So material balance, in the name itself it is there. So we use law of conservation of mass. Whatever you are dumping into the furnace, it should give you back in some other form. That means whatever input you are providing to the furnace, the same equivalent should come out in some other form as output, right? So what are the inputs in blast furnace? So in blast furnace we add in ore, we add in coke, we have flux, and also we have hot blast. Correct? Hot blast is nothing but the hot air, okay, that you use for combustion of coke. These are all some important inputs. And what is the output? Main outputs are my hot metal, that is the liquid iron, plus slag. Okay, slag is another liquid which contains all the impurities. Also you have top gases. Okay, what is top gas? Top gas is nothing but the gases that are generated, they'll flow up to the top and collected there. So this is an equation, okay? So inputs equal to outputs. So we are talking about the total weights, but you can also target one particular element or one particular compound, and you can balance their weights from input and output. How we can do that, sir? It's very much simple. So let's take an example of iron. Okay? So because iron is the main thing in blast furnace, let's take example of iron and let's explain it. Okay, so iron, so ore, absolutely, ore is something which is the input of iron. From ore only you are collecting the ore. Then yes, Fe present in the ore. Coke, usually coke doesn't contain iron. Flux and hot blast also doesn't contain iron. So iron in the iron in the ore is converted into the iron present in the hot metal, plus if there is any iron going into the slag. Okay, usually we assume that the iron loss is zero. Basically we say this as iron loss. And all these material balance are actually based, these calculations are all based on per ton of hot metal, that is 1000 kg hot metal. Okay, so usually we write THM, okay, ton of hot metal you are producing. Then how much of the ore is required, or how much iron is present in the ore, something like that, right? Now if you carefully see ore, so ore will not contain Fe directly, correct? Ore will not contain iron. If that is the case, no need to do all these things, right? So what you basically need to do is you use what? Iron ore, correct? You use iron ore. So what is iron ore? Basically Fe2O3 hematite ore is used in blast furnace, right? Now let's assume, okay, for calculation purpose, let's say that I have 1500 kg of Fe2O3. So what will be my term used in this here, in this equation? Okay, and one more thing here, let's say not this also, but 1500 kg 80% Fe2O3 ore. That means out of the ore only 80% is Fe2O3, right? So what is the Fe2O3 content? Fe2O3 content is 80 by 100 into 1500, right? This is Fe2O3 content. But if you carefully see, we are only bothered about Fe, not Fe2O3. Correct? So you need to deal with this guy now. How much of iron is present in Fe2O3 should be known to us. So for that you can easily do that. So Fe2O3. So here you have what? 2Fe plus you have 3 by 2 O2. Right? Or you can simply write 3O for easy calculation purpose. So here if you are doing this, you can say that 1 mole of Fe2O3 contains 2 moles of Fe and 3 moles of O, or 3 by 2 moles rather, because it's O2. Okay, but we can also do this of weights. So what is the weight of Fe2O3? That is 160 grams. Okay, how I am doing that? Sorry for this. Yeah, how I'm telling that? So Fe, the atomic weight of Fe is how much? 56. So 2 into 56 plus 3 into oxygen. Each oxygen atom has how much? 16. So this is 112, this is 48. Therefore this is 160. Okay, so out of this 160 grams of Fe2O3, 112 grams are Fe and the rest 48 grams are oxygen. Right? That's what we got here, 112 and 48. Right? So you are bothered about this much. Okay. Now let's say you have some x kg or x grams of Fe2O3 and you want to know how much of Fe is present into it. Now Fe, because it's directly proportional, you can just take cross multiplication. So this will be x into 112 by 160. Right? So just crisscross. X into 112 is equal to 160 into the amount of iron. Now what is X here now? X is this guy. Right? So 80 by 100 into 1500 into 112 by 160 will give you the iron content. So whatever X it is, whatever be the weight, if you multiply by 112 by 160, you will get the iron content in the ore. Therefore, this 112 by 160, which you just multiply, you get, sorry, if you divide, you get 0.7. This is called as the mass ratio of Fe in Fe2O3. Right? This is how you need to go about and see about iron. So, if you have Fe2O3, you are taking how much of Fe is actually coming from it. Right? Easy? Similarly, the same thing can be for SiO2. Usually we do something called SiO2 balance for slag. Okay, again input equal to output, but we have silicon Si in hot metal. What about this? Again, you have to use this silicon percentage, whatever is the weight, and you need to calculate how much SiO2 can be formed from this Si. Okay, so how I can do it? Again, it's simple, same thing. SiO2 is converting to Si plus 2O. Okay, so this is 60. 28 plus 32. 60 grams contains 28 grams of Si plus 32 grams of oxygen. So now again the same thing. Let's say you have X grams of silicon. Okay. If you have X grams of silicon or X kg of silicon in hot metal, how much of SiO2 can be generated from that? Again simple cross multiplication. So this will be equal to X into 60 by 28. So this guy is the mass fraction of SiO2, okay, in my Si content. That means how much of SiO2, whatever Si you have in the hot metal is equivalent to how much amount of SiO2. That is what you get by multiplying this. Similarly, you can do this in all the other cases also. For example, CaCO3, CaO, the same thing will be repeated. So you can try that. Okay, so you have CaCO3 converted to CaO plus CO2. Okay, so you can try for this reaction also. So this is how you need to calculate and balance the input weights equal to the output weights. Okay, so I'm not taking it a lengthy problems, because yes, we'll anyway cover many of them in the course live classes. But yeah, I think the basics of how to proceed with the material balance is clear to you all. Okay, so yeah, this is what I have from my side. If you have any doubts, please feel free to ask. Yeah, you can talk. This is how live classes will be taking place. If you have any doubts, you can put it on the chat box, right? And you can always unmute yourself after the class, like how we are talking now. And if you have any doubts, you can right away solve it. Whoever is joining, the same way how I am talking now, it will be in the next 1 year, I promise. Even after that, for interviews, if someone needs interview guidance, we have that also sorted out. Okay then, thank you guys, thanks for attending, bye bye.